Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Greg, on a much-needed rest. He's going to be back next week. It is I, Chad Benson, in for Greg. Jim Garrity is always here on this holiday week. Karl Bernstein, pretty famous guy about something that happened, I don't know, way back in the day. He and Woodward did some stuff. Had some very interesting things to say about this president and what is going on with him, with his mental acuity and where he's at. Take a listen to some of this stuff.
Well, these are people, several of them, who are very close to President Biden, who love him, have supported him, have been among them are some people who have raised a lot of money for him. And they are adamant that what we saw the other night, the Joe Biden we saw, is not a one-off, that there have been 15, 20 occasions in the last year and a half when the president has appeared somewhat as he did in that horror show that we witnessed.
Yeah, that's telling, and more people are coming out. Karl Bernstein, though, saying it. Does it add any more cachet? No, but I think, we got to believe our eyes and our ears, and we've been seeing a lot of this stuff for a long time. We've just been gaslit by everybody, Jim.
Chad, I went back and I checked. It was June 2022 when, in the Morning Jolt newsletter, I predicted that sometime after Biden left office, that somebody like Bob Woodward, Karl Bernstein's longtime reporting partner, would write some book about the Biden presidency and would then say, well, it was very, behind the scenes, it was clear that Biden's health and mental acuity were fading, but there was a decision made by the White House staff that this had to be hidden from the public. Well, I got the wrong Watergate reporter, but otherwise and it's a little earlier than I expected. You are correct that this is not inherently shocking. I think maybe the frequency, as he said, 15 to 20 times over a year and a half. And let's note, Joe Biden does not have an active schedule, that he doesn't do evening events, that he generally does stuff in the middle of the day, generally doesn't do stuff on weekends. It's picked up a little bit since the 2024 general election campaign began in earnest, but there are long stretches of the time where the only people who are around the president are his family. And I think it's safe to conclude, based on what we saw, that a lot of this time, Biden is in that state where he really can't finish a sentence, where he really can't keep a train of thought. So we should sit up and take notice of this. And I think that, Karl Bernstein is I'm glad that Karl Bernstein is going on CNN and reporting this. And unless he heard this from his sources right now or very recently, my suspicion is that people have been hearing these kinds of stories for a while. And I'm kind of left questioning, when were you going to tell us? When did you feel like the American public deserved to know that the president was not functioning? Because I think when you get that, you really ought to report it as soon as possible. You should not save it for your post-election day book.
No. And I agree 100%. And, I hear all the time, Jim, it's democracy. We're fighting for democracy. You're fighting for democracy. And I just laugh because I say everybody always tries to scare everybody. It's easier to scare somebody than try to persuade them with actual thoughts, ideas, facts, and data. But when I hear that for real, I look at the Biden and the entire administration, I say to myself, everybody's known this has gone on for years. Everybody's known this is happening. And you talk about democracy, yet the people running this country, for the most part now, are probably people that are unelected. And I think we have a right to know that.
Yeah, we have an entire administration full of Edith Wilsons. For those who, we have a very well-educated audience. I suspect they get that reference, but just in case, Woodrow Wilson, late in his presidency, had a stroke. And for about, a little less than a year, all paperwork went through Edith Wilson. There's a belief that she signed things on her husband's behalf, that Woodrow Wilson was bedridden, and if not dead, but just unable to perform the duties, just out of it. And Edith Wilson was effectively making the decisions. So when Hillary Clinton was running, people were joking, oh, she'd actually be the second woman president and things like that. That's not the way the system is supposed to work. And this is, it's self-evident. It was always implausible that behind the scenes, Joe Biden was super sharp and so energetic and all that kind of stuff. But I think anybody who's dealt with an elderly parent or grandparent knows, okay, they have good days and bad days. And I think we were just kind of hoping the president had enough good days in him to get through the term. And I don't think, based on what we've seen, that's not the case. And let's point out, you and I are taping this midday Tuesday. The bad debate was Thursday night. Joe Biden has not done an interview. He has not done a press conference. He's done a rally where he read off a teleprompter. He went out and gave a statement about the Supreme Court decision. It was 4 minutes, and then he turned around and didn't take any questions. He's done a photo shoot with Annie Leibovitz. He's not doing anything that indicates that there's anything different from Thursday night, and yet we're supposed to take it on faith that everything is hunky-dory.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think America's not buying it. There's so much. I love doing 3 martinis, but this week is like one of those, like, how much stuff can you pack into 1 week of stuff? And you're thinking, my goodness, a lot. Let's move from there to crazy, because it's all crazy today.
Yeah.
There's a group of people that have to inform the president of certain things and tell him stuff. And guess what? They don't want to deliver the bad news.
This was a report in Politico that might be the single most frightening thing I've read in a presidency that had, no shortage of frightening facts. I'll just go at length. Quote, during meetings with aides who are putting together formal briefings they'll deliver to Biden, some senior officials have at times gone to great lengths to curate the information being presented in an effort to avoid provoking a negative reaction. Quote, it's like, you can't include that will set him off, or put that in, he likes that, said one senior administration official. It's a Rorschach test, not a briefing, because he is not a pleasant person to be around when he's being briefed. It's very difficult, and people are scared S-wordless of him. Now, Chad, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I have some familiarity with the presidential daily brief system and the intelligence community for, writing on my thrillers and stuff. And every day the president gets the briefing, and it is the best information they've got on here's what's going on all around the world involving national security, foreign threats, terrorism, the whole 9 yards. China, Russia, Iran, Hamas, a lot of days the president's briefing is going to have bad news in it. And there's no way to do the presidential daily briefing if the rule is only tell the president good news because he can't handle bad news. Or if you tell him bad news, he's going to, be really difficult or fly off the handle or get cranky. I almost can't believe somebody was saying this. And I almost can't believe that anybody around Biden would participate in this process and say, don't tell the president, it will set him off. Like, where does the buck stop? He's the president. He's got to have that information. I understand the fear that Joe Biden's not going to remember anything he's briefed. But this is not how the system is supposed to work. You're not supposed to protect the president. If you can't handle getting bad news, you should not be president. That's a big chunk of the job.
And this is something that if you would have said it 4 years ago, people in the media would be like, oh yeah, Trump never wants bad news. And Biden would never be that way. Biden wants the whole thing. This this sounds like something that you would hear back when Trump was president, he only wants good news about, puppy dogs and fluffy stuff. Don't give him any of the bad news. No, this is this president right now. And like you said, he may not remember it, but he needs to know it.
Yeah. During the Trump years, I remember reading a report that once a day, somebody would print off things that people were saying that were nice about Trump, whether it was columnists or social media or whatever. And people liked presenting that to him. Unsurprised. Like golly gee willikers, everybody likes hearing good news. And nobody likes hearing bad news. But that's what the job is. And so I don't really think anybody could point to Trump to say, oh, well, thus it's okay that Biden's staff isn't telling him the bad news because it's going to put him in a bad, really, you do. It's just mind boggling. And it indicates that we have a president who's just walking around with at best half the story because his staff is afraid to tell him the truth.
Yeah. Crazy. Speaking of crazy, the third one today on 3 Martini Lunch. I'm in for Greg Crumbs, Chad Benson here. As always, Jim Garrity with me. This is something I have wondered for a while. I've always thought I look at journalists because I have friends who are journalists and I have friends who are opinion piece people and they're just all there to shout because it's all about clicks and likes. And Jim, the frustration. Passing up the opportunity to dig deep inside and to find out what the hell was going on. I'm surprised Moore didn't do it. But I'm also surprised by the fact that people look around and go, I didn't know he was like that. And you're in the media and you're around him and you didn't know he was like that?
Yeah, look, this is what we saw Thursday night. You might be surprised by the degree of it. You might be surprised by the fact that Biden couldn't hold it together, never mind for 90 minutes, that he just went out there and was, doddering and forgetful and out of it from the first minute. But what caught my eye was this podcast discussion by Semaphore. By the way, it's Semafor. I originally spelled it Phor in a corner post today. And my attitude is, look, if you can't spell the name of your own place correctly, don't blame me that you didn't use the standard spelling of Semaphore. But anyway, this was founded by Ben Smith. Ben Smith used to be with Politico way back in the day. He was a media columnist for the New York Times for a few years. And probably best known as being the editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed News for nearly a decade, 2011 to 2020. So Ben Smith has been around the block. He knows covering this. He had a big book about, traffic and the news industry in the internet age. Well, he and his colleagues, Naina Raza and Max Tani, are doing this podcast. And the pitch or the description of it is, quote, "How did we get here? How did the media miss the biggest story in American politics? Many journalists were shocked by Joe Biden's decline showcased on a debate stage. But how could the American media fail to see the President of the United States clearly? Did we ask the wrong questions or fall for White House spin? Or did we, as Republicans claim, engage in a cover-up?" Well, and they talk about this, but when I saw this, I was kind of baffled by the fact, and Chad, I suspect you'll concur here, how often in the last couple of years have we heard questions like, how did we miss that COVID was dangerous to the elderly and immunocompromised, but much less dangerous to the young and healthy? How did we not notice that closing schools for at least a year was going to do serious damage to children's learning and development? How did we miss that the lab leak was actually a realistic possibility and not some crazy conspiracy theory? How did we miss that the Hunter Biden laptop was real? How did we miss that there was violent anti-Semitism being nurtured and spreading on America? Like, how many times in the last few years have we just found something that a lot of folks right of center kind of was their instinct from the beginning, kind of was, and that had been talking about pretty extensively in conservative media. But the mainstream media catches up months later, maybe years later, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, how did we miss this story? Well, you missed this story because you didn't want to see it. It wasn't, the problem is, and I put this as succinctly as possible, there are a lot of people in the media world who wake up and their attitude is, how do I convince people to vote for Democrats today?
Yep.
How do I convince people that Democrats are the good guys and Republicans are the bad guys? And that's not what people really need. What people really want is just tell me what's going on in the world. I'll decide what I want, how I feel about it, who I think I should vote for. Just tell me what's going on. And I have considerable faith that if I tell my listeners, my readers, and everybody who's my whole audience, here's what's going on, I have faith they're going to come to the right conclusions. And maybe they won't, maybe they don't. But my job is not just to be an RNC cheerleader. And yet a lot of people in the media, anyway, I've ranted, Chad, so I'm just baffled.
I love it. And you know what? You wonder how they miss it. They miss it because they ignored it on purpose. You've got was it Columbia University, the head of the journalism department, saying, no, you're not supposed to be, nonpartisan. You're supposed to use this as activism. And that's not what this is. People want the who, what, when, how, and why. And if we aren't capable of making up our own minds, that's not a good situation. But the reality is they're as culpable for this as the White House is, because you didn't dig deeper. And instead, when somebody asked a question about, hey, this doesn't look right, he doesn't sound right, instead of saying, you know what, maybe we should look into that, what did they do? They told everybody, you're crazy, you're awful, you're a right-wing conspiracy theorist, you're this, you're that. And now what's going to happen is they're going to uncover in more ways than people realize what's going on that the right would never have a chance to get into. And because of that, they're going to act like heroes, like they broke a story that was already broken.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, the idea of an 82-year-old man reaching a point where he can't, do the job as well as he used to, that's pretty self-evident. You just don't see a lot of, you can find exceptions. Chuck Grassley keeps winning push-up contests with people, but even you saw with Mitch McConnell this freeze up where even people who are fans of Mitch McConnell like myself are like, okay, Mitch, Cocaine Mitch, we love you, but I think it's probably time to think about hanging it up. You're just physically not in a state where you can keep doing what you're doing. And it's, we saw this with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We saw this with Dianne Feinstein. There is this real problem in politics. And I noticed most of these people on the left side of the spectrum, I'm sure we'll find somebody on the right if you think about it, but like Strom Thurmond, he's up into 98 or whatever he was. This sense that like people who are really too old to do the job, physically, mentally, the whole 9 yards. They just can't do it anymore, but they refuse to acknowledge it. And there's nobody around them willing to say, it's time for you to hang it up. And it's now because we have a gerontocracy, and we are now seeing the really terrifying consequences of this. And I don't.
And you know what? You know why there's nobody around him? Because the people around him enjoy all of the stuff that comes with the world that they live in, and giving up that power that they also enjoy is something that they're not ready yet to do.
Yeah. And it's just, none of this is how the system is supposed to work. And so this whole, kind of to tie a bow on this and this theme of democracy. Well, if you have lots of people who are behind the scenes, who are faceless, nameless, relatively anonymous, who are making the actual decisions, not the president, not the, then we don't really have a democracy. The system is not working the way it's supposed to, because it's supposed to be Joe Biden who's making the decisions as the president, not somebody else.
Somebody else, indeed. It is 3 Martini Lunch. You've had your crazy today. Great being here. I'm in for Greg. He's back next week. As always, Jim Garrity. You can follow me at Chad Benson. Jim, how does everybody get a hold of you?
I'm at National Review. I write columns for the Washington Post. I'm on Twitter at Jim Garrity. And Chad, I can't believe it's Tuesday. We only have one more day of this shortened holiday week, but I can't. We wake up every morning wondering what we're going to see next.
Yeah, you never know. We've only got 24 hours to figure it out, but I bet you within 24 hours there'll be something that breaks, something else we didn't hear about. It'll be interesting to hear. It's always good being here, man. Thanks so much.
See you, Chad.